Chapter 9. Milly-Molly-Mandy Gives a Party. Once upon a time, Milly-Molly-Mandy had a plan, and when she had thought over the plan for a while, she went to look in her money box. And in the money box were 4 pennies and a halfpenny, which Milly-Molly-Mandy did not think would be enough for her plan. So Milly-Molly-Mandy went off to talk it over with little friend Susan down the road. "Susan," said Milly-Molly-Mandy, "I've got a plan, only it's a great secret. I want to give a party in our barn to Farver and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie, and I want to buy refreshments, and you and I will be waitresses, and if there's anything over, we can eat it up afterwards." Little friend Susan thought it a very good plan indeed. "Will we wear caps?" she asked. "Yes," said Milly-Molly-Mandy, "and aprons. Only I haven't enough money for the refreshments, so I don't think there will be any over. We must think." So Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan sat down and thought hard. "We must work and earn some," said Milly-Molly-Mandy. "But how?" said little friend Susan. "We might sell something," said Milly-Molly-Mandy. "But what?" said little friend Susan. So they had to think some more. Presently, Milly-Molly-Mandy said, "I've got pansies and marigolds in my garden." And little friend Susan said, "I've got nasturtiums in mine." "We could run errands for people," said Milly-Molly-Mandy. "And clean brass," said little friend Susan. That was a lovely idea. So Milly-Molly-Mandy fetched a pencil and paper and wrote out very carefully, "Millicent, Margaret, Amanda, and Susan and Company have bunches of flowers for sale, and clean brass very cheap. We do not spell the polish, and run errands very cheap." "What's and Co?" said little friend Susan. "It's just business," said Milly-Molly-Mandy, "but perhaps we might ask Billy Blunt to be it, and he could be a waiter." Then they hung the notice on the front gate and waited just the other side of the hedge. Several people passed, but nobody seemed to want anything. Then at last a motor car came along with a lady and gentleman in it, and when they saw the nice white cottage with the thatched roof, they stopped at the gate to ask if they could get some cream there. Milly-Molly-Mandy said, "I'll go and ask Mother," and took the little pot they held out. And when she came back with it full of cream, the lady and gentleman had read the notice and were asking little friend Susan questions. As the lady paid for the cream, she said they must certainly have some flowers, so they each bought a bunch. And then the gentleman said the round brass thing in front of his car needed cleaning very badly. Could the firm do it straight away? So Milly-Molly-Mandy said, "Yes, sir," and raced back to the cottage to give Mother the cream money and to borrow the brass polishing box. And then she cleaned the round brass thing in front of the car with one piece of cloth, and little friend Susan rubbed it bright with another piece of cloth, and the lady and gentleman looked on and seemed very satisfied. Then the gentleman asked, "How much?" and paid them 2 pence for the flowers and a penny for the polishing. Milly-Molly-Mandy wanted to do some more polishing for the money, but the gentleman said they couldn't stop. And then they said goodbye and went off, and the lady turned and waved, and Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan waved back until they were gone. Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan felt very happy and pleased, and now they had 7 pence halfpenny for the refreshments. Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs, little friend Susan's mother, made 7. Then, who should look over the hedge but Mr. Jakes, the postman, on his way home from collecting letters from the letter boxes. He had seen the notice on the gate. "What's this? You tryin' to make a fortune?" said the postman. "Yes," said Milly-Molly-Mandy, "we've earned 3 pence." "My, and what do you plan to do with it?" said the postman. "We've got a secret," said Milly-Molly-Mandy with a little skip. "Ah," said the postman, "I guess it's a nice one, too." Milly-Molly-Mandy looked at little friend Susan, and then she looked at the postman. He was a nice postman. "You won't tell if we tell you?" she asked. try me," said the postman promptly. So Milly-Molly-Mandy told him they were planning to give a party to Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs. "They're in luck, they are," said the postman. "Nobody asks me to parties." Milly-Molly-Mandy looked at little friend Susan again, and then she looked at the postman. He was a very nice postman. Then she said, "Supposing you were invited, would you come?" "You try me," said the postman promptly again, and then he hitched up his letter bag and went on. "Farver and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs and the postman. We've got to earn some more," said Milly-Molly-Mandy. "Let's go down to the village and ask Billy Blunt to be and co, and perhaps he'll have an idea." Billy Blunt was in the road outside the corn shop, mending the handles of his box on wheels. He had made it nearly all himself, and it was a very nice one, painted green like the water butt and the lawn roller. He thought Ann Co. was a rather funny name, but he said he would be it all right, and offered to make them a box with a slit in it, where they could keep their earnings. He put in 4 farthings out of his collection. Billy Blunt was collecting farthings. He had 19 in an empty birdseed bag. So now they had 8 halfpenny for the refreshments. On Monday morning, on their way home to dinner, Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan passed Mrs. Jakes, the postman's wife, at her door, getting a breath of fresh air before dishing up her dinner. And Mrs. Jakes said, "Good morning. How's the firm of Millicent Margaret Amanda Susan and Co. getting on?" Milly-Molly-Mandy said, "Very well, thank you." "My husband's told me about your brass cleaning," said Mrs. Jakes. "I've got a whole mantel shelf full that wants doing." Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan were very pleased, and arranged to come in directly school was over in the afternoon and clean it. And they cleaned a mug and 3 candlesticks and 2 lamps, 1 big and 1 little, and a tray and a warming pan, and they didn't spill or waste any of the polish. Mrs. Jakes seemed very satisfied, and gave them each a penny and a piece of cake. So now they had 10 halfpenny for refreshments. But when they got outside, Milly-Molly-Mandy said, "Farver and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs and the postman and Mrs. Postman, I wonder if we've earned enough, Susan?" As they turned home, they passed the forge, and of course they had to stop a moment at the doorway as usual, to watch the fire roaring and Mr. Rudge the blacksmith banging with his hammer on the anvil. Little friend Susan was just a bit nervous of the blacksmith. He was so big, and his face was so dirty it made his teeth look very white, and his eyes very twinkly when he smiled at them. But Milly-Molly-Mandy knew he was nice and clean under the dirt, which he couldn't help while he worked. So she smiled back, and the blacksmith said, "Hello," and Milly-Molly-Mandy said, "Hello." Then the blacksmith beckoned with his finger and said, "Come here." Milly-Molly-Mandy gave a little jump, and little friend Susan pulled at her hand, but Milly-Molly-Mandy knew he was really just a nice man under the dirt, so she went up to him, and the blacksmith said, "Look what I've got here," and he showed them a tiny little horseshoe, just like a proper one, only smaller, which he had made for them to keep. Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan were pleased. Milly-Molly-Mandy thanked him very much, and then she looked at the blacksmith and said, "If you were invited to a party, would you come?" And the blacksmith looked at Milly-Molly-Mandy with twinkly eyes and said he'd come quite fast, so long as it wasn't before 5 o'clock on Saturday when he was playing cricket with his team in the meadow. When they got outside again, Milly-Molly-Mandy said, "Farver and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs and the postman and Mrs. Postman and the blacksmith. We'll ask them for 5:30, and we ought to earn some more money, Susan." Just then they met Billy Blunt coming along, pulling his box on wheels with a bundle in it. And Billy Blunt grinned and said, "I'm fetching Mrs. Bloss's washing for the firm." Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan were pleased. When Saturday morning came, all the invitations had been given out, and the firm of Millicent Margaret Amanda Susan and Co. was very busy putting things tidy in the barn, and covering up things which couldn't be moved with lots of green branches which Grandpa was trimming from the hedges. And when 5:30 came, Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan, with clean hands and paper caps and aprons, waited by the barn door to welcome the guests, and each gentleman received a marigold buttonhole and each lady a pansy. Everybody arrived in good time, except the blacksmith, who was just a bit late. He looked so clean and pink in his white cricket flannels. Milly-Molly-Mandy hardly knew him, and Billy Blunt. But Billy Blunt came lugging a gramophone and 2 records which he had borrowed from a bigger boy at school. He never told, but he had given the boy all the rest of his collection of farthings, 15 of them, which makes 3 pence 3 farthings, in exchange. And then there were refreshments. Then Billy Blunt, who didn't want to dance, looked after the gramophone, while Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs and the postman and Mrs. Postman and the blacksmith and Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan danced together in the old barn till the dust flew. And Milly-Molly-Mandy danced a lot with the blacksmith, as well as with everybody else, and so did little friend Susan. They did enjoy themselves. And then there were refreshments, raspberry drops and aniseed balls on saucers trimmed with little flowers, and blackberries on leaf plates, and sherbet drinks, which Billy Blunt prepared while Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan stood by to tell people just the very moment to drink when it was fizzing properly. It was exciting, and a jelly which Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan had made themselves from a packet, only it had to be eaten rather like soup, as it wouldn't stand up properly. But Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs and the postman and Mrs. Postman and the blacksmith all said they had never enjoyed a jelly so much. And the blacksmith, in a big voice, proposed a vote of thanks to the firm for the delightful party and refreshments, and everybody else said, "Hear, hear," and clapped. And Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan joined in the clapping too, which wasn't quite proper, but they were so happy they couldn't help it. And then all the guests went home, and when the firm came to clear up the refreshments, they found there was only 1 aniseed ball left, but placed among the empty saucers and glasses on the bench were a small basket of pears and a bag of mixed sweets with a ticket for the waiter and waitresses on it. Chapter 10. Milly-Molly-Mandy Gets to Know Teacher. Once upon a time there were changes at Milly-Molly-Mandy's school. Miss Shepherd, the headmistress, was going away, and Miss Edwards, the second teacher, was to be headmistress in her place and live in the teacher's cottage just by the school instead of coming in by the bus from the town each day. Miss Edwards was very strict and taught arithmetic and history and geography and wore high collars. Milly-Molly-Mandy wasn't particularly interested in the change, though she liked both Miss Shepherd and Miss Edwards quite well. But one afternoon, Miss Edwards gave her a note to give to her mother, and the note was to ask if Milly-Molly-Mandy's mother would be so very good as to let Miss Edwards have a bed at the nice white cottage with the thatched roof for a night or 2 until Miss Edwards got her new little house straight. Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie talked it over during supper, and they thought they might manage it for a few nights. Milly-Molly-Mandy was very interested, and tried to think what it would be like to have teacher sitting at supper with them, and going to sleep in the spare room, as well as teaching in school all day, and she couldn't help feeling just a little bit glad that it was only to be for a night or 2. Next day she took a note to school for teacher from Mother to say yes, they would be pleased to have her, and after school, Milly-Molly-Mandy told little friend Susan and Billy Blunt about it. And little friend Susan said, "Oh, won't you have to behave properly? I'm glad she's not coming to us." And Billy Blunt said, hard lines." Milly-Molly-Mandy was quite glad teacher was only coming to stay for a few nights. Miss Edwards arrived at the nice white cottage with the thatched roof just before supper time the following evening. Milly-Molly-Mandy was looking out for her, and directly she heard the gate click, she called Mother and ran and opened the front door wide, so that the hall lamp could shine down the path. And Teacher came in out of the dark just as Mother hurried from the kitchen to welcome her. Teacher thanked Mother very much for having her, and she said she felt so dusty and untidy because she had been putting up shelves in her new little cottage ever since school was over. So Mother said, "Come right up to your room, Miss Edwards, and Milly-Molly-Mandy will bring you a jug of hot water, and then I expect you'll be glad of some supper straight away." So Milly-Molly-Mandy ran along to the kitchen for a jug of hot water, thinking how funny it was to hear Teacher's familiar voice away from school. She tapped very politely at the half-open door of the spare room. She could see Teacher tidying her hair in front of the dressing table by the candlelight, and Teacher smiled at her as she took the steaming jug and said, "That's kind of you, Milly-Molly-Mandy. This is just what I want most. What a lovely smell of hot cakes." Milly-Molly-Mandy smiled back, though she was quite a bit surprised that Teacher should speak in that pleased, hungry sort of way. It was more the kind of way she or little friend Susan or father or mother or grandpa or grandma or uncle or auntie might have spoken. When Teacher came downstairs to the kitchen, they all sat down to supper. Teacher's place was just opposite Milly-Molly-Mandy's, and every time she caught Milly-Molly-Mandy's eye, she smiled across at her. And Milly-Molly-Mandy smiled back and tried to remember to sit up, for she kept on almost expecting Teacher to say, "Head up, Milly-Molly-Mandy, keep your elbows off the desk." But she never did. They were all a little shy of Teacher just at first, but soon Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie were talking away, and Teacher was talking too and laughing, and she looked so different when she was laughing that Milly-Molly-Mandy found it quite difficult to get on with her bread and milk before it got cold. Teacher enjoyed the hot cakes and wanted to know just how Mother made them. She asked a lot of questions, and Mother said she would teach Teacher how to do it so that she could bake them in her own new kitchen. Milly-Molly-Mandy thought how funny it would be for Teacher to start having lessons. After supper, Teacher asked Milly-Molly-Mandy if she could make little sailor girls, and when Milly-Molly-Mandy said no, Teacher drew a little sailor girl with a sailor collar and a sailor hat and pleated skirt on a folded piece of paper, and then she cut it out with Auntie's scissors. And when she unfolded the paper, there was a whole row of little sailor girls all holding hands. Milly-Molly-Mandy did like it. She thought how funny it was that she should have known Teacher all that time and never known she could draw little sailor girls. Then Mother said, "Now, Milly-Molly-Mandy, it is bedtime." So Milly-Molly-Mandy kissed Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie, and went to shake hands with Teacher, but Teacher said she wanted a kiss too. So they kissed each other in a quite nice friendly way. But still Milly-Molly-Mandy felt, when she went upstairs, she must get into bed extra quickly and quietly, because Teacher was in the house. Next morning, Milly-Molly-Mandy and Teacher went to school together, and as soon as they got there, Teacher was just her usual self again, and told Milly-Molly-Mandy to sit up or to get on with her work as if she had never laughed at supper, or cut out little sailor girls, or kissed anyone good night. After school, Milly-Molly-Mandy showed little friend Susan and Billy Blunt the row of little sailor girls, and little friend Susan opened her eyes and said, "Just fancy Teacher doing that." And Billy Blunt folded them up carefully in the creases so that he could see how they were made, and then he grinned and gave them back. And little friend Susan and Billy Blunt didn't feel so very sorry for Milly-Molly-Mandy having Teacher to stay then. That evening, Teacher came up to the nice white cottage with the thatched roof earlier than she did the day before. And when Milly-Molly-Mandy came into the kitchen from taking a nice meal out to Toby the dog and giving him a good bedtime romp round the yard, what did she see but Teacher, with one of Mother's big aprons on and her sleeves tucked up, learning how to make apple turnovers for supper. And Mother was saying, "Always mix pastry with a light hand," and Teacher was looking so interested and didn't seem in the least to know she had a streak of flour down one cheek. What did she see but Teacher learning how to make apple turnovers? When Teacher saw Milly-Molly-Mandy, she said, "Come along, Milly-Molly-Mandy, and have a cooking lesson with me. It's such fun." So Milly-Molly-Mandy's mother gave her a little piece of dough, and she stood by Teacher's side, rolling it out and making it into a ball again. But she was much more interested in watching Teacher being taught, and Teacher did everything she was told and tried so hard that her cheeks got quite pink. When the turnovers were all made, there was a small piece of dough left on the board, so Teacher shaped it into the most beautiful little bird. And the bird and the turnovers were all popped into the oven, together with Milly-Molly-Mandy's piece, which had been a pig and a cat and a teapot, but ended up a little gray loaf. When Father and Mother and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle and Auntie and Teacher and Milly-Molly-Mandy sat down to supper, Teacher put her finger on her lips to Milly-Molly-Mandy when the apple turnovers came on, so that Milly-Molly-Mandy shouldn't tell who made them until they had been tasted. And Teacher watched anxiously, and presently Mother said, "How do you like these turnovers?" And everybody said they were most delicious, and then Milly-Molly-Mandy couldn't wait any longer, and she called out, "Teacher made them," and everybody was so surprised. Milly-Molly-Mandy didn't eat the little gray-brown loaf because she didn't quite fancy it. Toby the dog did, though, and she felt she couldn't eat the little golden-brown bird because it really looked too good to be eaten just yet. So she took it to school with her next day to share with little friend Susan and Billy Blunt. And little friend Susan said, "Isn't it pretty? Isn't Teacher clever?" And Billy Blunt said, "Fancy Teacher playing with dough." And little friend Susan and Billy Blunt didn't feel at all sorry for Milly-Molly-Mandy having Teacher to stay then. The next day was Saturday, and Teacher's furniture had come, and she was busy all day arranging it and getting the curtains and the pictures up. And Milly-Molly-Mandy, with little friend Susan and Billy Blunt, came in the afternoon to help. And they ran up and down stairs and fetched hammers and nails, and held things, and made themselves very useful indeed. And at 4 o'clock Teacher sent Billy Blunt out to get some cakes from Mrs. Hubble's shop, while the others laid the table in the pretty little sitting room. And they had a nice kind of picnic, with Milly-Molly-Mandy and little friend Susan sharing a cup, and Billy Blunt having a saucer for a plate because everything wasn't unpacked yet. And they all laughed and talked and were as happy as anything. And when Teacher said it was time to send them all off home, Milly-Molly-Mandy was so sorry to think Teacher wasn't coming to sleep in the spare room any more that she wanted to kiss Teacher without being asked. And she actually did it, too. And little friend Susan and Billy Blunt didn't look a bit surprised either. And after that, somehow, it didn't seem to matter that Teacher was strict in school, for they knew that she was really just a very nice, usual sort of person inside all the time.